Welcome back, everybody. Today it's apparently full news day for epicseven. They've not just showcased a bit of Wretched Rose, they've not just showcased the roles or given some details about the collaboration, they've also announced the balance patch, which I completely forgot, and I apologize, but I'm here literally 4 hours later after recording to now, well, I guess talk about the balance patch. Now, if you haven't seen this already, this is a mega giga big one again, which I think is just going to be the trend this time, or this, I guess, from this point going forward, or from a few past times actually going forward, with it now being 14 heroes and 2 artifacts. Without further ado though, let's get into everything that's changed and I guess some thoughts on the characters that are being affected. Now, to start things off, the character list is Maid Chloe, Little Queen Charlotte, Operator Sigret, finally, Fumir, Command Model Leica, Tempest Surin, Lena, Commander Lena, Carrot, Researcher Carrot, Helga, Mercenary Helga, Christy, and Silver Tide Christy. Now, I will say it is a bit cheap, or a bit of a cop-out to say that this is 14 characters that are technically being changed, because, well, it's more like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is more accurately what this is. It's not really 14 individual characters, it's really more like 10 with some I guess like special changes kind of baked into it. That said, they are also affecting 2 technically limited artifacts with Draco Plate and Unfading Memories, but as a bit of a disclaimer, I've read through and kind of had some time to sit through the changes, and I'm honestly pretty impressed overall with the patch, but let's actually break down what's being changed. So first things first, Maid Chloe is now being changed from being definitely less offensive to being more defensive. The first thing that they're changing about her is that now she has a combat readiness increase on her S1. Pretty nice, especially if you're playing some sort of slower kind of anti-cleave or some sort of tank slow sort of playstyle anyways, just in terms of giving yourself more turns. To add to this though, they're also changing her ER effect, which honestly was already pretty good, but now they're changing it so that now you have 50% additional damage reduction to all allies. Now, let me be clear, this does not mean that she has 50% base damage reduction for all damage that is being had. No, this is specifically referring to the additional damage, I believe, that is also present on a character like Fallen Cecilia. So she's kind of sharing that role, or that kind of anti-Renac type, I guess, fulfillment or sort of role that she's trying to play here. Now, to add to this, they're also increasing her revive heal to 30% instead of 20, and they're also increasing the defense of all allies instead of giving them attack buff. Now, this is a pretty different change, and this, alongside the cooldown and the Gemini change constellation wise, is definitely making her way tankier, or like kind of protect the team more, as opposed to being more offensive. Formerly in the past, Maid Chloe would be more offensive, I would say, while still trying to revive and provide a bit of value. Now, although there were definitely still people that were trying to play characters like Crimson Armin alongside Maid Chloe, there was still the benefit of there being an attack increase, though definitely, or I would argue in some cases, pairing someone like Crimson Armin and the Maid Chloe, and then I guess trying to do that now and pairing it with someone like Abyssal Yufine, doesn't really quite make as much sense, especially because, like, what are we doing with the attack increase? But now, with there being more tanks or more bruiser characters that don't necessarily scale with attack, but just want some survivability and can kind of give some sort of self-damage steroid, this defense increase that gives them just increased survivability is honestly amazing. It's going to be pretty impactful, I would say, and though I'm not entirely sure right now whether or not this propels her into being the most OP character ever, as again, it is a bit odd, I would say, just because, like, again, I don't really know why people would rather necessarily have Maid Chloe over Fallen Cecilia, just in terms of barrier value over this defense buff. It is still worth mentioning, of course, that the revive and obviously the defense increase is significant, though again, this is not really stopping people from one-shotting any characters. There's no mitigation here, and again, of course, there are still people that fly around with characters like the Briar Witch Iseria, or otherwise otherwise we'll just have some sort of ignore ER, in which case you'd rather have, again, some sort of tankiness from someone like Fallen Cecilia. Though again, I'm not trying to you know, speak too early, as again, I'm sure there's probably a scenario where you just take Fallen Cecilia and Maid Chloe, and now Renak is dead and gone. Okay, in any case though, the next character we have to talk about on the topic of barriers is actually Operator Sigret, who's now been buffed a significant amount. Now to start things off, she's now given a self attack increases rather before she uses her S2, which is obviously amazing. However, to add to this, the ability also just at base fully defense penetrates the target's defense, which does maybe to me suggest that she could be able to one-shot a squishy with this, just because again she has an attack increase and full pen defense. However, as you can see here, they did decrease the damage dealt of this ability, though they, I'm assuming in this case, are trying to compensate for this by giving the barrier or by giving a damage increase steroid whenever attacking a barrier target. Now again, in terms of this, I'm sure they were just thinking to themselves, wow, we shouldn't just let this character one-shot every squishy in the game, because that would be absolutely ridiculous. And they've seen what this has happened, or seen what this has done in the past. However, with this, I'm a bit hopeful, or I'm hoping that she's able to more reliably kill characters through something like, again, like a Fallen Cecilia banner or barrier, or rather, I guess, some of the other barriers in the game, including, I guess, I don't know, the prot sets of the world. However, in general, though the pen defense is pretty nice, and of course I'm hoping that this increased damage steroid on the barrier is significant, something tells me that with the advent or the introduction of characters like ML Ilinov, and honestly with all the fast characters in the game, it might feel a little bit difficult, or it might be a bit sketchy to try and run someone like Operator Sigret, unless if you absolutely giga gear gap someone, which you might be able to do. But in any case, this being buffed is probably the biggest change when it comes to Operator Sigret, and it's probably something that a lot of people have been waiting for. Me personally though, I didn't necessarily think that Operator Sigret in concept just didn't do enough damage with her skill 2. It's that there were so many other characters in the game that would stop, counter, or like prevent you from picking someone like Operator Sigret, or you'd have to, again, always run the gambit of, okay, you have Operator Sigret to get rid of barriers. Well, what if they ban Operator Sigret? Now you have to fight against a Fallen Cecilia, if that's something that you're afraid of, and that effectively defeats the purpose of the Operator Sigret. In any case though, in terms of Obliterate, they've also buffed this to now push back 30% instead of 20%, and they also increase the damage of this, with it also or with the effect also having a new soul burn, and this increasing the total damage dealt. Now I don't exactly know, and we have no clue right now, what the damage multiplier of this ability is. If this is something where you can S2 and maybe nuke something or one-shot something with the S3, fantastic, amazing. That would be honestly one of the better changes for Operator Sigret, as again, it kind of feels like she's I don't want, like, it would be dishonest to call Operator Sigret a budget strays, but in terms of one-shotting a character, getting an extra turn, and then having another AoE follow after, that is basically what Strays does, except Strays doesn't need a barrier. He kind of just has to have more attack than the enemy team, which is pretty easy given, well, it's Strays. And I actually, you know, in most cases, I don't think there's actually a scenario where you'd be able to use Operator Sigret but not Strays, or vice versa. In any case though, I think the Operator Sigret changes are nice. Again, this is a damage focused change, and everything I said could completely go out of the window once they announce something different. But just from my initial gut reaction, or gut take, or, you know, I guess interpretation of this, I'll have to see in terms of where they go with the game before I can really call whether or not this is being like a placebo buff, or whether it's not enough, and like she should have some pen defense, or she reduces penetration defense, you know what I mean, something a bit more less generic. Because again, just in terms of this, like, you have penetrate targets defense, okay, you're probably not killing through Ilinov still anyways, and they're probably also an Aureus, so it is what it is. Now going forward though, we've actually had a quality, not a necessarily quality of life, but a functional accessibility change for Little Queen Charlotte. Now, first and foremost, she now provides an actual team-wide damage reduction instead of her crit reduction, which again is different than the additional damage reduction from Maid Chloe. She's also now immune to debuffs which prevent movement, which is honestly fantastic. However, you should know that the movement debuffs, or debuffs where you can be slept or stunned, while this is pretty significant, it is also very much worth noting that you are still obviously prone to getting blinded. You are still prone to getting attacked down. So for those of you thinking that you may be able to run something like or an immunity list Little Queen Charlotte and run it into characters like the Conqueror Lilius or things of this nature, that's not the case. Just keep that in mind. However, to add to this, they also have now introduced in theme with removing all the crit hit based attacks or functions in her kit. Now whenever she gets or whenever one of her allies get hit by an attack, she now increases the combat readiness of herself by 10%, which is again a bit of a nerf from what she had before, which was 15% every time she got a critical hit, but now it's 10% and whenever anyone gets hit at all. Now in terms of her skill 3, they're now changing this so that instead of needing to be a dark element when using the skill 3 for the nuke and splash, she's now able to do this actually just whenever she hits a target, regardless of what their element is. Now notably, this isn't being changed damage wise whatsoever, so obviously if you are going to use a skill 3 on a tankier target, don't expect this to one shot any target just because. Now obviously she does or I should say she will still deal more damage to dark element characters specifically, but the idea here, at least from what I understand, is that should a dark element character be banned, or should you need to ban a dark element character, it's not as though Little Queen Charlotte is useless. Like, you'll still have the splash. However, they haven't removed the initial OG effect, which is that if you decide to use the skill 3 on a dark element, you'll still do increased damage and you'll still have the splash. It's just that again, the splash is no longer restricted to dark elements only. Now interestingly as well, they've also introduced a 10 soul burn cooldown reduce or a cooldown decrease for her skill 3. This is honestly pretty interesting. If I'm not mistaken, her skill 3 isn't that long of a cooldown to begin with. I don't think this means that she'll have it up every time that she has souls for her skill 3. If this is the case, that would be pretty crazy, but they haven't announced or haven't shown any specific cooldown reducing thing, which to me, I'm not sure if the extra turn is an equivalent to this or if these are the exact same. They've effectively just kind of exchanged the extra turn for this cooldown reduction while also costing less souls. Whatever the case is, if this ends up being a one-turn cooldown or something, that would be crazy. Don't think it is, but otherwise I think this is just a decent quality of life for Little Queen Charlotte, I should say. But again, similar to the operator Sigrets of the world, this is again still not a character that you could use if you want to one-shot a dark unit if Ilanov is on the team, though again it is, I guess, nice if you're forced to hit into someone and you want to splash the enemy team. Though again, I don't necessarily know where that really comes up in many situations where, unfortunately, I hate to beat a dead horse, but there's a lot of, or I guess only so many characters that feel like they're the best of their class right now and that you can actually fit in and justify a slot. And while Little Queen Charlotte is definitely going to be a bit more usable, I cannot again imagine that you wouldn't even honestly just use someone like Operator Sigret over Little Queen Charlotte, just because again Little Queen Charlotte is a bit more I guess if you're going to use her to be way tankier, or you're going to use her for damage reduction, that's fine. And I take back my statement. That, I guess, is the main value to someone like Little Queen Charlotte, and that's fine. However, if you're just trying to nuke or trying to use this Little Queen Charlotte in that 250 to 260 range as a speed nuker, don't think that'll be the case as much anymore, especially with you now being or not being able to now get an extra turn with her soul burn, and you not being able to do an S3 into S1 tap. Now, they are also changing the Covenant characters. Now, Fumir is also being buffed, which is pretty interesting. And effectively, from all these changes that they've announced here, which is a lot, honestly, in essence, what they're doing is basically changing the condition for her S2 to activate. And now, effectively, if you have any spread of element, not just fire and earth units, but if you have any separate share of elements, including the moonlight characters as well, you'll actually add to this focus, and to add to this, you actually will now increase the amount of damage that you dealt per focus, which is pretty good, I guess. Again, there's a lot of changes here. I don't necessarily know if the focus thing was even different from what we had formerly in terms of like the elemental wisdom. The elemental wisdom, as far as I understand, was just like you being able to take the turn, or it's like it's a bit confusing. Long story short, though, you are still going to have a decent amount of flat damage from what I understand, and obviously the main changes here is that first and foremost, you are not only able to use LDs, or light and dark units, in order to chain or activate her S2 passive. You're also able to increase the skill cooldowns of enemies by 1 turn now, instead of, and they've actually removed the speed decrease or the slow from her kit, but they've also introduced a 10% increase to the combat readiness push back, which is pretty nice as well. But just as a heads up, they did not remove, or rather they got rid of the ignore ER on S3, which honestly, not like the most insane change ever. You are basically always running this Fumir character on like over 200 effectiveness anyways, which I don't know, kind of defeated the purpose of like the soul burn. But in any case, I think this Dispel 2 buffs is also pretty nice. Dispel 2 buffs into, again, increased cooldown, and then also decreasing by 40%, and then also having the additional focus, and then also, like it's quite a big change to Fumir. I think people will probably be picking her a bit more, maybe in the same slot where people took Silverblade or Araminta, but as a cleaver, we'll have to see, as again, there's a whole lot of changes being introduced right now. Now for Leica, they've changed her skill 2 now so that she gives greater attack increase instead of just attack buff to the highest attack ally with her skill 2, which is amazing. Honestly, this is probably something that would be really nice if you're just trying to use a greater attack increase, even in something like Hunt. And honestly, I think that's the last time I even saw something like Leica be used. However, I do want to say that in terms of the overall changes in her design and kit currently, even with the Dispel All buffs from the enemy when using skill 3, I believe skill 2, this should be the skill 2, this is kind of okay, I guess, but this is not like an ignore ER or anything. And then again, even in terms of your skill 3 for volley fire, decreasing the buff duration of the target by 1 turn, like, yes, these are ways to I guess kind of buff her role as a stripper, but then if you were to really pick, and again, not to like downplay or not, I guess what is it, not to like put down Leica and a lot of these other characters that are being buffed, but like right now the game is so Moonlight centric and so limited centric that it feels like a lot of these characters, if they don't have something game changing or game breaking, like almost akin to something like a Leica change, it feels like maybe these are great changes for people that have to play in something like the E7 World Championship, or maybe with the new changes to the with the, I guess, like the Wayfarer or whatever it is, the cards where now the rules get changed, maybe this is a character that gets brought up in one of these drafts. But otherwise, I think it's quite difficult to find a location where you don't want a guaranteed like defense break on a skill 2, or before you dual attack with someone, or you wouldn't necessarily want like a full strip and a seal from like a New Moon Luna, or you wouldn't want like a knock wall to fully reset with someone like with like your opener, which I think all these things basically point towards command model Leica being a bit outdated. And although I think this is a decent change for her, especially in the PvE line, I don't know if this is necessarily enough to keep her really, as they say, in line with the balance adjustment, but we'll see. Honestly, still great changes, though it might not be enough in my opinion. Now for Tempest Surin, they're effectively just giving her life steal into her kit while also giving her I guess a slightly higher increased chance to unbuffable, and that's fine, I guess. They've increased the damage of this too. I think the main thing here is that the vampirism here on swift movement basically allows you to be on either speed set or destruction, depending on whether or not you want to be something crazy. I could also maybe imagine that if someone's running Moonlight Dreamblade and running some sort of cheese strat, you might be able to use the new repose set, which could be kind of annoying in terms of healing and S1 healing. But overall, they obviously just don't want you to be locked behind this have to build lifesteal on this character. And honestly, it feels like they've done this with a lot of characters recently, where it feels like some characters that you would want to survive as a bruiser can't because they don't have lifesteal set, but then once you put lifesteal set on, you don't have enough stats or something along these lines. But moving along with this, they've obviously changed the EE now, where she absorbs some of the healing with her S1 to now increasing the chance of bleeding with this ability by 20%. Fine, obviously they changed this. I don't think anyone's going to be using the bleed anyways though for the lunge S1, but the overall addition of the heal and vampirism, nice, decent. And obviously the damage increase, fine, though excuse me, again, I don't know if this is a character that people will reach for over someone like Spirit Eye Celine, which again is already a character that isn't necessarily pick ban every game, nor is a character like a Miki, who again is also kind of like an Uno reverse cleaver, which is in the past basically what Tempest Surin was. Okay, now in terms of the 3 stars, they've changed a whole lot of things. I'm really gonna be going over their role in the awakened variation, just because, well, I don't know, guys, like if you're using base Lorena, props to you, Giga Chad. Anyways, so they're changing a few things. I think Commander Lorena is probably the most interesting of the changes. First and foremost, she is now being more, I think she now just does more damage, I guess, based off of effect resistance is the way that I'm understanding this. I really don't necessarily understand the direction of this, just because, again, like, I guess if you're trying to run her as like a budget, I don't know, like ML Arya, like, okay, that's fine, I guess. But if you just read like her kit in general, like she's now increasing or dealing damage specific, proportional to the target's max HP, which is fine. She is also granting herself more dual attack chance, which is also, like, again, fine. But now, while they've significantly increased her attack, she's now has like significant effect resistance scaling, where now, like, if you have 200 ER, she can't suffer more than 35% of her max HP when attacked. And again, while this is significant, and again, they keep increasing things like her dual attack chance and her damage all around, like, I don't necessarily know how you're even supposed to fit 200 effect resistance while also being a damage dealer. And again, they've also changed things, so now, like, when you use sharp blow, there's a 100% chance to heal yourself proportional to your attack. And then they also just keep increasing the damage that you deal in general. So again, now these are obviously like pretty interesting changes, and they do give you like a decent amount of damage, I guess, overall. And it doesn't look like she's necessarily losing anything, to be clear. However, it just feels like, in terms of like what she is being given. Oh, side note, by the way, I forgot to mention, she does gain 50 effect resistance at base, but again, 150 effect resistance on a 3-star character, to me, reads like effectively, unless if this guard rune can be applied with other effects, like you know, a Christy or something, in which case, you know, spoiler alert, we'll get to her early, or get to her later, she's also pretty good. But this whole like stat distribution, like, I think it would just look incredibly goofy to have like a 2k attack or like a 3000 attack, like 150 or 200 crit damage, and then 200 ER like character. Like, I don't even necessarily know what the point of this is. I guess she becomes like kind of like a pseudo Spirit Eye Celine, or like a pseudo Tempest Surin, but she doesn't have stealth. She doesn't really have any like, oh my god, you hit me and I'm below 35%, or, you know, I'm below 35%, here's my special ability that makes it so now I like clap back and I heal myself. It's just, no, like, I can't die, which is, I mean, I guess like, you know, I don't necessarily, like, I can't tell if this is supposed to try and bring her in line as a PvP character, which again, I think would be interesting, especially since there aren't that many in the game. But I don't know if Commander Lorena, who most people were using to one-shot, you know, some PvE content, is the character I would have changed. Like, if you wanted to change someone like Ricarus, or if you wanted to change even someone like I don't know, Elson, who has like no PvE usage and is like clearly like kind of lost his purpose in life, then like, okay, maybe. But like Commander Lorena now being changed to need 200 ER is like, okay, I guess. Like, I unironically, just as a side note, also think that there's a chance that even despite this like change to the amount of like lost health, maybe there's like a chance that people just end up using her, like not changing her build whatsoever, and they just use her as like an attack increase character, or rather they just take all these buffs to her stats and they just still use her again as like a DPS. Who knows? It's a bit, I don't know, unusual. Again, through like their description, by the way, like they say things like with the Unity and Sun Rune, they allow her to like increase like her total dual attack chances, and as a result, the longer the battle goes on, the more she'll be able to accumulate damage against enemies through dual attacks and create a variety of variables. First off, a variety of variables, like what it like like this doesn't even, like, this sounds to me like they have no idea what they are necessarily even cooking with Commander Lorena, and they're like, well, no one uses her anymore, like, you know, no one's gonna use this character anymore, like, let's just kind of cook with her. Fine. Again, I'm not necessarily one to criticize changes like this. I do obviously acknowledge that removing this character, if you've used her, can feel a little bit bad, but honestly, I don't think most people you know, would use someone like Commander Lorena over like a Fene, or, you know, I don't know, even like an Aiden, or, you know, some other DPS. And honestly, with the new hunt events and with them basically removing all content and forcing you to build like some niche RGB unit, I'm sure Commander Lorena is like the last character that's on your mind in terms of losing DPS. I mean, hell, honestly, you're probably even using some like strays over Commander Lorena nowadays. But like, in terms of this, cool, I guess. Like, maybe she's someone like she's a bit more leaning towards like a Spirit Iceline with ER, or like an ML Aria in terms of like just gaining a bunch of free stat. Overall though, she looks weird. I guess I'm sure there'll be like a YouTube video where someone tests her out, but it is what it is. Now, Carrot is also being changed. This change is way less confusing. They've effectively just gotten rid of all the like, not utility necessarily, but they've gotten all the weird things out of her kit now, and they've effectively just buffed her to do more damage completely surrounding her burn. Now, first and foremost, her S1 now inflicts a burn, which is cool. Like, honestly, decent change. Her skill 2 now also grants herself an attack increase after being attacked. Now, this change is significant, if I'm not mistaken, because this means that if you attack, or the way that I think buffs are calculated is that, or rather debuffs are calculated, is that they are calculated and they snapshot the buffs of the character that is being attacked and the enemy that is being attacked. And this means effectively that since there is a quote unquote attack increase on Carrot as the burn is going out, this means that this burn that an enemy inflicts on themselves after hitting Carrot will just be significantly steroided or buffed in general. This, if I'm not mistaken, you can even test how much damage someone like Carrot will do currently if you give her an attack increase, and then you just hit her, and then you compare that damage to if she didn't have the attack increase, and you can kind of compare how much damage she'll do. Overall though, this does just make her a bit tankier. No, I shouldn't say tankier, but like more threatening in terms of damage. However, I think one of the bigger changes, or one of the I guess more significant changes here, is that she can now also strip 2 buffs, which is something that people used to abuse in the past with things like barriers and immunities, and then Carrot kind of just died the second that you gave yourself like a protection set and immunity, or like, you know, you started stacking like 2-3 buffs together. However, as a final note, they also changed Swing's buff, or rather chance to increase or inflict burn by 5%, which makes it an 80% chance, which is fine. This is just a small, but like I think pretty honestly impactful, like threatening buff to research Carrot. Do I think people are still going to use this character? Again, hard to say with all the changes for RTA right now. Maybe, perhaps, don't know, but we'll see, of course. Now, in terms of the other 3 stars that they're changing, Helga's changes are okay, I guess. They're slightly increasing the chance to defense break, you know, when all allies are element. They've also changed it now, or they've reduced her requirements to gain the critical hit chance from 70 to 50, and they also increased their chance to defense break by 15% to 75. honestly, I don't really know what they were trying to cook with Helga either. Do I think she's good in the previous iteration where she, you know, or where she was good for originally? Yeah, I mean, there were definitely people that were using her for content like Earth expeditions. This doesn't really change anything for her from that role. It makes her a bit more consistent, I guess. But if you were using the if you were already using the Helga and, oh gosh, at this point I can't even remember what her name is, the 3-star Earth Ranger that can like target enemies and also combat radius pushes, if you were, rather not for Earth Expo, for Water Expo, if you were already using like Sid plus Helga plus that character for Earth Expo, you're probably, or oh my god, I keep saying Earth Expo, for Water Expo you were already killing pretty handedly. Like I think I was one-shotting, and most people were one-shotting Water Expo in one turn by themselves with just like a decently built Sid, like I think 2 years ago. So just an odd change, and I don't think this like makes her PvP viable or leaning, kind of similar to what they did with some of the other characters. This looks like just a PvE change. And if we're, you know, just on the note, if we're going to be changing the characters like effect chances, it's really confusing that this character does not, you know, break the game in any real way, shape, or form. And again, like I don't know, it feels like if they were going to change, like, you know, if they were going to change her, oh apologies, by the way, I should mention, with the Wedge Rune, and in addition to this, her effect chance does go to 100%, so that is obviously nice for people trying to like one shot, or I guess like it kind of lessens some gear requirements, I guess, in a sense. However, point being, if you were going to like buff a character like this, I feel like either you may have wanted to add additional, like, you know, maybe give an attack increase on the skill 3, or maybe, you know, reduce or like apply attack down with her skill 3 or her skill 2 or something like that. So it feels like there's a bit more meaningful value here, because honestly, again, with the characters I just mentioned, you're already killing 99.99% of the time. Again, if you're a newer player, I guess this is aimed towards you. So if that's the intended change, then fine, okay. But defense break, it is what it is. You already had an 80% chance to do it formerly. And again, like, I don't know, the Water Expo was not that difficult. It is what it is, though. Maybe the next Rift or something has to do with this and you can defense break. We'll see, though. Okay, moving aside, though, probably the biggest change in terms of, honestly, the 3 stars is just going to be Christy. Now, you guys have probably all seen the really cringe like Zeo trapping, where people will take like guiding light characters, and then like you'll kind of have to deal with like either hitting like an Aiden that one-shots your team, or you have to deal with hitting Christy who pushes up a target, both of which are obviously affectionately termed or coined quote unquote what is Zeo trapping, if you're familiar with that term. However, in terms of this change, them changing the 50% shared effect resistance with the back ally or back row ally, this 50% increase to 100% of the caster's effect resistance is bonkers. Like, just plain out, like, this is crazy. Like, 300 ER is like kind of the baseline for a lot of people's Christies, and now even if you were to make it 250, there are some characters that just have an unfathomable like amount of ER. Like, to be clear though, you could obviously, you know, run an effectiveness-less team if you are trying to run the gauntlet of putting in like a Silverblade Araminta, and you just have 250, and you're trying to debuff someone like an ML Aria, or even like a character that has some ER, like a base Aria. Silvertide Christy just makes it impossible for you to get debuffed. Like, 100% of the caster's ER basically means that at most you need what, like 130 or 150 ER on whatever carry you put in the backline, and they have 400 ER. Like, I don't even like, you know, put a character like Bellion with ER in the backline, and now you're really not killing anything. Which, again, or I should say, not killing, or not that you're not killing, but you're not debuffing anything. And now, to add to this, they're also of course increasing the amount that you heal with the skill 3, and they're also increasing the damage share from the back row ally to 30% instead of 20. And effectively now Christy has an undebuffable character in the backline, assuming of course she doesn't get, I mean, if she gets sealed, it is what it is, but like, effectively, like, what you're seeing here, right, is that this is like a character that cannot be debuffed like whatsoever anymore. Now in terms of she herself, like maybe if you're trying to run her like way tankier, you might find yourself being debuffed, but like this 100% sharing of effect resistance is crazy to say the least. Like that is one of the most bonker changes to a 3-star I've ever seen. She was already good in terms of avoiding ER or avoiding debuffs with 50. 100 just basically makes this absolute. Honestly, probably the biggest winner of the patch is Christy, from the 3 stars, I should say. Speechless, honestly. Crazy change, honestly. I can't say any more on this. I'm running out of things to say on honestly for the 4th time, just because I don't know how to process this. I keep thinking that this is a goof or a change or a mix-up, because 100 is pretty crazy, but maybe there's a chance that, you know, I guess in the future this just means that she's more versatile. You can just run her with like more HP and just give 100 ER to someone like ML Arya, and now she's like an unstoppable, like, you know, killer, or she's like an immovable force because now she doesn't need that much ER. Whatever the case is, I'm positive that people are now not going to die with like the Christy, Arya, and Destina comp against debuffers, which is cool. Now, okay, let's get into the artifacts. The artifacts are both being changed, or both the artifacts being changed are limiteds. The changes though are pretty significant. Now for the Draco plate, there's now a 15 to 30% damage reduction instead of 8 to 16, which is basically double what the artifact had before. This artifact though is pretty much like one of the most dated artifacts that we have in the game. In terms of this, obviously I think 30% critical hit reduction is pretty significant. This is effectively what like Little Queen Charlotte was giving to the team. Now, do I think this is going to be usable on anyone? Maybe. I just think that in most cases you would probably want more generalized damage reduction like Proof of Valor, or you would maybe want to all in on something like a Benimaru's Tachi or one of the, you know, the attack increasing artifacts instead of just getting 30% crit damage. It's pretty rare, I think, to need or want both. And otherwise, you know, you have things like Merciless Glutton, or you have other artifacts that will give you damage, which is fine. But really tough to say if there's anyone that specifically wants this. Even like the old characters like Apoc Ravi and stuff, they'd likely want something, you know, HP increasing, or they'll rather like one of the health increasing artifacts instead, or like more dedicated damage artifacts. So this feels like a bit out of place, though obviously I could maybe see this being something that you use if you have no other artifacts available. Unfading Memories is also now being changed to not only, or rather I should say it's being nerfed a little bit. The effect resistance is being nerfed by 5%. However, now it increases the effect resistance of all allies by 20%, which is crazy value, by the way, especially if you're trying to add or trying to give like team-wide ER or spread imprints ER wise. This might be something that you could still probably find on someone like the Maid Chloe's of the world. This does also now change, or it's had its passive effect change, so that now at the start of the turn, you recover the health and ally, or you recover rather the health of all allies by 4 to 8%. Now you don't have to obviously use a non-attack skill. This is now just a start of turn effect. This basically looks like the best in slot artifact for someone like Maid Chloe, outside of some weird effect resistance cheese where you want like Bastion of Hope. However, great, honestly fantastic. I think Maid Chloe's eating good. This artifact is great, and overall, guys, just in terms of all the changes, these look like at the very minimum they're good changes to the characters. Do I think it'll bring some of the characters like straight back into the top of the meta? Maybe not, but again, we're at a very tumultuous kind of like unsteady or like ground shaking kind of point in RTA, where everything is changing up quite a bit because of the new effects that are being added to the game. Overall though, I think the changes were on the better side. There was a lot of characters being changed, with there still being 10. However, I do think it's kind of funny that they said, oh my god, look at how many characters we're changing, 14, and it's like 10, but with like 4 characters being reused. In any case, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Kudos to SMILEGATE, honestly, another decent change, or another decent quality of life to characters that otherwise had no business being picked whatsoever. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting balance patches, alongside, of course, all the changes that they're already introducing to the game. That's going to be it for today's video. Again, though, great. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.